How long have you been doing game development? Roughly how
Well,
long?
mate, I've been doing game development professionally for about 20, just on 20 years, really.
Okay.
But unprofessionally, you could say I'm still a bit unprofessional now, but um, I've been doing it as a hobby since I was probably, 10, maybe even younger than that. I had a little book that, teach yourself how to make games, and you literally type out the code from the book and run it on your old. This is gonna show how old I am. I'm like, in my mid 40s now. You would type the stuff into a book on your Commodore, and then it would run up and say, "You are in a forest," and you go north, that kind of thing. And I sort of learned from there. But I've always had an interest in it.
Wow. And so, welcome, my friends, to
Yeah, Ryan,
episode
it's great to
three.
be here. Episode 3. Humans are weird. We are weird indeed. This is true. There's never been a more apt title for a podcast.
I'm joined by a good friend, Oliver Joyce of Whiskey Barrel Studios. A lot of people know him as the creator of Swords and Sandals, my childhood game. And today, joining us to talk about his life experiences, the things that he's gone through of being a game developer, as well as being a human, and maybe talking about all of these things.
I can't wait to get started. Yeah, and it has been a journey. You realize no matter what you've done in your life, when you get to a certain age, you look back at the sum of it all, and you go, "Wow, I now have a story to tell." We didn't expect on the way, but it's nice to have someone who wants to listen. So I look forward to it.
Absolutely. And before we jump into it, like we do with every episode, let's take a moment to become grounded and present and hear fully. So if you're listening along, please join in. Let's take a moment and slowly close our eyes and take a deep breath in through the nose, filling the chest and stomach with air, and slowly letting it go. Continuing this deep, mindful breathing, being fully aware of the inhalation and exhalation, sinking deeper into our body, becoming more mindful of the world around us. If you currently have any worries or problems, just leave them at the door for now. If you really want, you can pick them back up at the end of the podcast. And taking a time to be grateful for having stopped, not having anything to do, nowhere to be, and coming back into the room, looking around like it's the first time you've seen the room, taking some time to just be present and grateful. And now I have to kind of be honest, I feel like I'm almost fanboying in a sense, because a part of me is like, okay, I got to keep this chill, calm, but inside I feel like my heart's kind of racing, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this
Ah,
is my childhood like hero playing Swords and Sandals.
please, no, no, I'm like, please, you're worthy. Get up, to quote a movie from a long time ago called Wayne's World. But no, honestly, I I'm just in awe of people like you and your good friend Jerome and so on for what you've been able to build in YouTube and connecting with your communities, because in a weird way it is a sort of it's like a kind of a symbiotic relationship in terms of without the streamers and the content creators of the world, no one would have ever played games like mine, until sort of the coinciding of my game coming out back in about 2006 was when the first Sword and Sounds came out, and maybe 2007, was a kind of the rise of YouTube. And it was only because of people like you and Jerome and others that started playing the game and then showing other people that I'm able to do this today. So, there is a lot of mutual respect there. And also, I'm just a game developer. I'm really, there's nothing else behind there that needs to be sort of, there's no halo or anything like that.
I
Just
think it's so funny how we in a sense, build up these people, especially in today's world. It feels like we live in a world of just celebrities and idols, and we put all these people on a pedestal because of the amount of followers they have or the amount of fame that they have. And it's so interesting how we really, idolize these people as really famous, and it's kind of like really pounded into us. And I even still deal with this when I talk to a quote unquote
Cool.
famous person. I feel like anxious and nervous, and then I realize it's just a person. It's just another guy, another girl, just like us, living life, doing what they do.
And they too probably get anxious around their own heroes.
Yeah.
I'd imagine that sort of maybe in a different field, you might find that like, I don't know, maybe Taylor Swift gets nervous around like meeting Dolly Parton or someone that she might have grown up, loving or that kind of thing. So, and it's important to also know that, like you said, everyone is human and everyone has their own insecurities and so on. And the celebrity will present this front of like, I am all powerful, all conquering, all charismatic and so on. But, behind the scenes, they're just as nervous about one thing or another. They've got something going on in their life that we don't know about. And as long as you kind of realize that we're all just, flesh and bone, sometimes you can kind of, it probably takes a while to get used to that and stop being starstruck by people. But, they are just human. But it's hard when they are, you have looked up for them for so long, right?
Right, absolutely. There's a quote that goes along the lines of, be kind to everyone because everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about. And especially with today's culture of, Instagram and social media, we're always posting the best versions of ourselves. And when you're really famous and you have all this time and money and all these things, you can afford to post a really good version of yourself and sweep all the other things kind of under the rug and not necessarily show them to the world. And so a lot of the times we forget about that. And as individuals, we really only see the negative things about ourselves and always like put a spotlight on those things. And then we put a spotlight on the positive things of others. And it creates this weird dynamic where we, scrutinize ourselves and pick other people up.
That's right. And these things, everything you see on Instagram and Facebook, and we all know this, but it's all heavily curated and in a way kind of designed to make you feel inadequate sometimes. It's sort of like, look what this other person is doing, look how good their life is. And there's that old saying, comparison is the thief of joy. Because we will always, be, as soon as we see this, we take ourselves out of our own lives and think, but whatever I was happy with before, imagine if I had this yacht or I was here in, this tropical island, that kind of thing, when in reality, that person might have just been, surrounded by mosquitoes, or they just had a call about their grandparents had a fall or something like that. So there's always something. They're only presenting this best life, but it doesn't tell the full story. And it's so easy to just want to compare yourself to everyone else and everyone a little bit. It's got a bit more than you or whatever. But it is a major problem for our society, and especially the younger generations that are growing up online, because what's the reality here? We can't compete with this.
And so
This false sort of curated life.
And so, what do you think is the one of the bigger questions? Not the cure, but how do you think we guide people to not have this comparison, this kind of battle with social media, and this struggle of always kind of wanting something that's not necessarily going to make us happy?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't really have an answer, except I think because it's unrealistic to say just get off social media and delete your accounts and so on, because there is also a lot to be gained from the connection and the experiences that you can get from being connected to people from all around the world and being introduced to new places and sites and things that you wouldn't normally see. I guess you just have to kind of, as you say, that first quote of you don't know what someone else is going through. Always be aware that like what I'm looking at is not 100% the reality, and also like I can create my own memories, and I can look at this and go, well, that's cool. I would like to have that, but how realistic is that? Um, yeah, it's a very tricky one
Yeah.
because as we go through life now, everything is documented, either by you
Yeah.
or by someone else. So it's really hard to unplug from all that.
And so, how is it? I guess since you're part of the older generation, it's not really something that you've kind of had to grow up with.
Oh
But
man.
have you had any experiences with this yourself, with this kind of comparison? Because I know
Well,
you talk about game development, and that's what you do. Do you find yourselves comparing yourselves to other game developers and the creations and processes that you do?
yeah, and this will sort of touch upon this as we go through the podcast today. Um, I am always, and I don't want to do it, but I'm always comparing myself to other game developers and also to a standard that is very hard to live up to. And it's almost like, um, in a funny way, I sometimes think of myself like, imagine like, and this is again going to show my age. There was a singer in the 90s called Vanilla Ice who had a song called Ice Ice Baby, right? In the early 90s, okay? And he never did anything else and or of note, like he did a few other Ninja Turtle songs and stuff like that. But so this guy, for anything else he does, people are going to go, "Oh, you're the guy that did Ice Ice Baby," and there's
Hmm.
thousands of one-hit wonder examples of this, and I often feel like I'll ever be known as, "Oh, you're the guy that made Swords and Sandals." If anyone knows who I am at all, that's what they'll know me for, and that can be a good thing, but it also makes it difficult to kind of try and branch out and do something else. So whenever I try to make a new game or branch out and do something else, I'm constantly feel like I'm competing with um, this version of myself that did that, and or like maybe you're only ever good at doing one thing, and so
Yeah.
I'm still feeling this inferiority of like, could you ever do anything else? Can lightning strike twice kind of thing? And I'm going through that right now, and so I do feel a real sense of, and you talk about other game developers as well. I always see on Twitter and so on other successful games made by indie developers and so on. And I kind of go, oh wow, I'd love to be that guy. Or look at that acclaim that they've got, or look how many people are playing that, and you think, oh, what if I'd come up with that idea? But the reality is, for every person that has had a successful idea, there's 1,000 people that
Hmm.
haven't, and so you have to be realistic about, you know, your own successes, and also just go easy on yourself because you know it's not it's not the reality of of game development is most of the time you're going to fail. Every now and again someone will succeed, but you know I'm just going to feel like I'm just lucky to be still doing it now after all this
Yeah,
time.
I kind of resonate with that in a certain sense and kind of understand what you're saying, especially with, I do balloons content. And so I always go, you know, I'm the guy who does balloons videos. And so
Yeah.
and I never could really get out of it. If I wanted to, I think I could really push it, but it's kind of like, well, if I'm known for this, why should I should kind of keep
Hmm.
doing this. But I kind of love to talk about the fact that that's not who you're letting define you because you're known for swords and sandals, but you don't want that to be your staple. You've kind of talked about this previously on Express This, and you're working to build a new game, right? A new thing that you're working on that we've kind of talked about. And so
Hmm.
you're kind of going against this fear of and this comparison of, oh, I could just make swords and sandals games or I could just do this, but it's not what you want to do, right? It's not what you're kind of driven to do. You want to create games and do new things. And so even though you're kind of worried about this and have this underlying fear, you're going out to create something new. You're putting your heart and soul into this new project and kind of pushing out to that. And I think that's so important is to always be trying to expand and grow and not get caught up in, our past successes or failures and always moving forward for that.
You totally have to do that, and that's a great way of putting it. You can't sort of just rest on the laurels of the past because then you'll stagnate, and then you too will get sort of resentful of what you did in the past and trying to live up to that. But almost stepping sideways as I've done this year and try to so I've built like literally about 9 or 10 different swords and sandals games and spin-offs and remakes, and it's over nearly 20 years, probably a little bit less than 20 years, maybe 15 years, but it's a lot of time to spend on one thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then also it does start to define you creatively, and it also the expectations of you. So to be able to step sideways is almost like just being able to go, well, um, hey, I'm completely free to do what I want now, but it also then puts you at the start of the race like everyone else. So you no longer have that advantage of, like, say with you and balloons, um, you don't have the guarantee of the people that like you or follow you for what you do, uh, that won't necessarily go with you on the next step of the way. So it is like you're removing the safety net, and,
Yeah.
and that can be exhilarating, you know?
That's wonderful to hear. And so, one of the things I'd love to hear you talk about is that, you've been a game developer and you've worked on these things because I'm hoping, assuming it's what you're passionate about. And so,
Oh
I'd
yeah.
love I'd love to talk about this word happiness. And I'd love for you to talk about what does happiness mean to you and how do you live your life to kind of get what we call happiness or work to have it in your life?
Yeah, this is a great question. And when we talked about doing this podcast earlier this week, I've been thinking about that all week and trying to kind of just, think internally, what does happiness, what defines happiness for me? And, you know, there are so many measures of happiness. And the first thing that came into my head was, for me, happiness is the absence of chaos.
Oh, I
And that
like
sounds,
that.
you know, and I don't know, like the best way to describe it is sort of when you wake up and you go and you do what you do, whatever it is that you do. If you don't have those random spanners that come in, like, okay, the car needs fixing, or all of a sudden I've got a sore leg, or or something way more major than that, or some kind of unpredictable element, uh, that takes you out of that reverie of, like, oh, I'm just going about my business. And that can be mistaken for sort of just, you can be just content and not super happy, but you only realize that you're unhappy when something like that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's taken a long time to truly be content in the day-to-day minutia of my life, and allow the little things along the way that make up a happy day. So this you can kind of, and please stop me if I'm rambling here. So um, or just interject when you want to. But I feel like with happiness, is sort of, you can divide it into sort of little states of happiness, and then that add up to greater states of happiness. And the little things like, okay, walking up the road to get a coffee, and just taking that 10-15 minutes to sort of clear your head, and the little routine you have every day or every few days or whatever it is, or for me as a parent, just hearing the sort of the my kids laughing in the background, as they are now, sort of they're off in another room. I got two young kids, or it might be on a professional level, hearing some feedback about one of my games, that, hey, I really like this game or whatever, and they're all little kind of, it's like a little experience bar that goes up in a game term, and that adds up to moments of happiness that bring you general contentment. But it cannot, it they are all sort of fairly fleeting, you know what I mean? And I think
Right.
a larger state of happiness has to come from being content with the steps you've done in your past to get to where you are, and knowing that, um, although you could have done things differently, you are now where you are because of all the things you've done in the past. And if you try to think of, what could I have done differently to get here, that can make you unhappy. So as long as you can
Yeah.
try to kind of go, well, here I am. You can, and it's like I keep coming back to the word content, and content and happiness. What's the difference, right? Being content in your life, kind of eliminates the negative energy to a
Mm-hmm.
point. And as soon as you've eliminated the negative energy, you have more time to focus on, the minutia of what makes you happy. And as Jerome was saying, like, um, often you think you can, pursue goals to make you happy. And when I get this, I'll be happy. When I get 1 million subscribers on YouTube, I'll be happy. When I release a game that makes me this much money, I'll be happy. Goals are good because they get you, motivated. But if your only measurement of happiness is when I reach this goal, I'll be happy, then you never get there.
Yeah.
You always have that, you know, that feeling of discontent.
Absolutely. Yeah, so well said. I think it's so important to have this contentment in your life, being appreciative of where you are now. And I love what you said, talking about like all of the things you've done, whether you call them good or bad, has put you where you are now. And that's so important, to people are always like, well, this could have been this way or that could have been that way. And it could have, but it didn't. And now we're here. And so there's times where we can find ourselves in a life situation that's not great. As you can say, the car might break down, or, we might be dealing with a family issue, or, we find ourselves in a position in life that we're not, we're kind of feel like we're stuck in. And, it brings this baggage, this heavy weight to it, this tightness in our chest, or these problems. And I think it's so important to be able to not wallow in them, but be able to move forward, but also be content while moving forward and working through the problems in our lives. Because as you said, there's always going to be something that comes to try to take this happiness. There's always going to be not problems, but situations and challenges we find ourselves in. Life is not an easy process. There's always going to be tests, challenges, roadblocks, bumps, and ways that kind of take us off the path of what we want to do. And I think it's important to see these and not let that take away from the joy of now, the joy of being where we are now, and be able to work through them while still being mindful and appreciative. Kind of like, as you said, taking that 10-minute walk to go get a coffee and clearing your head and just taking time to be.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And you also touch upon a point there where you and I, and like I'm sort of speaking for myself, but hopefully for you, we're coming from a position in our lives right now of great contentment. And I would say for me, happiness. And I think I've probably never been happier, which has come from being where I am in my life. But often, a lot of the people maybe listening today may not be in that position. And in certain times in your life, you have these peaks and troughs, and you might be listening now and go, well, I'm not happy. And, I can't really be content in where I am right now because, it's not a matter of, just, being content with this because I'm in a pretty bad situation. There's that saying, it's always darkest before the dawn.
Yeah.
So you may be in a pretty dark situation right now, but know that things change and they can change for the better. So if things are just going badly for you, things can and do turn around. Sometimes you need to intervene. Sometimes your luck changes and so on, but you do need to try and just snatch happiness where you can, even though it sounds ridiculous. If you're in a pretty dark time with your health or whatever reasons, try just for your own state of being. It's how they say, if you can't get out of bed in the morning, and everything feels too much, you just got to take it in tiny steps. Just put your clothes on, put your shoes on. And then if you can get out of bed and do that, then you can just do everything in 5-minute chunks of okay, if I just, clean my desk or something like that, or make the bed, then everything gets easier and easier. It's how do I eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I used to not a long time ago, it was actually several years ago, I was in a not great place. I used to be a very depressed individual, and to the point where I couldn't really get out. I was that person who couldn't get out of bed in the morning. I was that person who, I wouldn't take showers and during the day. There was times where I would be in that position where I just couldn't bring myself to do things. And it was so interesting because it's a catch-22 where it's me not doing those things is what made me feel so bad. And I felt so bad because I wasn't doing those things. And it was this cycle. But as you said so wonderfully, it's one bite at a time. It's, just get out of bed. And then, maybe you can't do all of these things, but you do them in small increments. My dad has a great saying that he talks about, and he says, life is all about tolerations. And we have things in our life that we tolerate. And so,
Mm-hmm.
for example, having a dirty room, you tolerate. Every time you walk in, you see this dirty room and you tolerate it. Having dirty dishes, having uh, emails that you haven't responded to, a test that you need to do work. So we have all these things that we need to do and we tolerate it. And we get to a point in our life where we have so many things that we've let build up that it swallows us and we feel so trapped and helpless. And we have all these things. And the way you break out of that is by doing the little things that you can when they're presented to you. When you walk in and you see there's just a mess, just take 5 minutes to tidy it up. And then you will be amazed as you slowly go through your life and remove these tolerations that you find yourself living in a much more, peaceful and calm environment. And one thing you also said, where it's always darkest just before dawn. Whenever you're doing something in life, you always, especially when it comes to learning, but anything in life always goes through 4 stages. And you can apply this to anything: learning, a relationship, a new skill, anything at all. It starts in the very beginning with high enthusiasm and low skill. So you're really excited about it, but you don't know anything about it. And then the next stage of it is where you have low enthusiasm and low skill. And this is where it gets really difficult because you don't know what you're doing, nothing's going right, and it's really frustrating. And this is where most people give up. And this is the key for relationships, learning new things, learning a musical, anything at all. And then if you push through that, and where it gets real, because you feel like I can't do it, it's not going to work, I'm not good at it, all of these negative thoughts and emotions, if you push through that, then you start to get you still have low enthusiasm, but now you're starting to get more skill. And then you get through the other side where you now have high enthusiasm and high skill. And that's so important to keep that in mind. Whenever you're doing something and it feels really, really hard, that's because the boulder is at the very top of the hill and you're about to push it over the hill and it's going to roll down on the other side.
Ah, that's so well said. That's absolutely true. And like you said, you do go through these 4 stages, and very easy to quit on that second stage of low enthusiasm and low knowledge. And and it's it's not just with, like, say right now, you're learning the piano or you want to learn the piano. It's there in the background, sort of like, almost taunting you. You love the sound of the piano, and you can recognize the sound of a great pianist and how they can express themselves um, through music and not through words, but you don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, but you kind of don't know if you can do it. But like you said, as with learning, as with getting yourself out of a funk, whatever, it's small steps. And then you'll be surprised with, and it's the same with exercise. I can't run 5 kilometers. So I go, I walk for a bit and I run for a bit. And then the next day I go a little bit further, and a little bit further. And all of a sudden, my lung capacity is a bit better. And then you didn't even realize, but your body adjusts and your mind adjusts. And then all of a sudden you're running 5 kilometers, or you're playing, chopsticks on the piano. Then that chopsticks turns into like Moonlight Sonata or whatever it is. And it's all a series of small steps. So my oldest boy is Isaac is 5, and he is a good drawer, but he gets very frustrated with himself when he can't draw perfectly. And then I'm also an artist, and so I draw. And then he goes, "Why can't I draw like you?" And I said, "Well, the only reason I can draw like me is because I had to go through thousands of pieces of paper where I wasn't drawing like this, where I was, making little mistakes and making little mistakes until I wasn't making the mistakes." And I always say with drawing, especially, there's no real mistakes. It's all just, learnings and happy accidents and so on that you learn from. So everybody wants to be good at something, or, happier, or, better, or whatever it is. But that doesn't happen without putting in the work and the
Yeah.
small steps along the way. And as long as you just don't try to tackle it at once, but if you can just do a little bit and build good habits every day, you can apply this to anything. Good habits every day. The best habit is consistency. Even if you're only doing a little bit. And I struggle. I mean, it's really easier to sort of preach this and say this, but I'm good at that in some respects, and then in other things I'm useless at it. So with game development, I've gotten. I'm sure you're the same way. You're disciplined at one thing, but then another thing you let out the window.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I that definitely hits me. real hard. And I think it's really important to find that discipline in our lives, to apply that small step to everything we do in our life, right? Because the journey of 1,000 steps begins with just the first one, right?
Yeah, I love that one.
And you have to be able to take one step every day, right? And
Hmm.
if just one step, just a little bit of growth, because then you get to look back in a year and you go, wow, like look at how far I've come. Look at how the distance I've been able to go with this. It's so absolutely crucial, I think. And so I'd love to kind of talk about, we're kind of going about this, but that always taking that one step extra, because you're doing this thing that it requires that, right? This game development, working for yourself. And how do you kind of, how do I put this? Get started with that. Like if you have this big project, right? How do you get started on a huge project of like a game, right? Or if you want to do something in your life, for example, like mastering a piano or learning a skill, what are the steps that you take? Like I know it's one little ones,
Yeah.
but like how do you structureize like creating a massive vision?
Great question. And I think this can, like I said, it can apply to anything, and it can be like learning a daunting new hobby, like learning piano and so on. What I like to do is I'll often get inspired by something and go, oh, I want to be good at this, or I'm going to build this game about this. If you then go out straight away and buy all the tools you need and the best gear, and or you write up all this stuff about it that day, sometimes you're too caught up in the moment. You need to kind of let it sit and simmer at least for a week or 2 weeks and see if you still want to do it. Because I'll often have these, especially with games, and I'm probably games are especially anything that is a creative pursuit that takes a long time to make, be it a long book or a movie or whatever it is. Um, you have to kind of be prepared to be committed for a long time. So you have to kind of know, is this idea still going to be fun to me in 2 weeks or 3 weeks? So often what I'll do is I'll kind of go, come up with an idea, write it down, and then 2 weeks later, another idea comes on. And it's very easy to, and a lot of game developers especially will go, oh, okay, now I want to do this. And they'll pivot from there to here and leave a trail of unfinished projects in their
Mm-hmm.
wake. But if you come up with an idea and you stick with it, and then it still sounds good to you in a few months or even longer, that means you're probably going to be passionate about it. So the idea is the key at the beginning. But then, as they say, everyone is an ideas man. So, the implementation of the idea, the for me, I don't find it challenging anymore to sit down for a big project because I've done it a long time. So I kind of know that um, I can do them because I've done it before. So uh, the reassurance just comes from you trust in yourself that yep, I've already done this before. But if you've never done a big project before, uh, perhaps probably shrink it, make it smaller. Start smaller. But then having, I don't know, everyone says that, but then by the other hand, it's like some of the great successes are people that just ignored all that advice and went big, and their first project was just this crazy big thing that no one ever thought of, and they killed themselves to do it. But then it kind of, blew up like a Stardew Valley or something. Where I'm not sure if you know the story behind that, but it's kind of quite a famous game success story. That's that farming game where there was a developer called Eric Barone, and he built this game over years and years and years. But he worked nights and weekends and had a day job, and his wife was supporting him, uh, helping to basically turn the lights on. And this project was way bigger than he had ever done before. He did all the art, all the music, and everything. And all this time, he's thinking, "Gee, have I bitten off too much?" But then, a few years later, it came out, and then now he never has to do anything else again. But if he'd sort of listened to the sort of like the inner voice saying, "This is too much for you. You can't do this," he probably would have built something a lot smaller and a lot less successful. So you have to go big and believe in yourself, which can lead to catastrophic failure. But you also have to be okay with catastrophic failure, as long as you realize that failure is okay. You can fail at
Absolutely.
something. Yeah.
That's I'm so glad you said that, because that brought me back to something that I wanted to bring up, which is the importance of being able to be the fool, to being the jester, because in order to become a master at something, you first have to be the fool. And so it's an evolution of archetypes or personalities per se. So anyone that was a master at something was once a fool at it. So it's very easy for us to look at people and say, wow, like a pianist, and be like, wow, they are amazing. Like, I could never be there. But they started by playing chopsticks too. And so it's important to realize, and I think kids don't struggle with it as much, but I started struggling with it more when I started to get into my early teens and 20s. And I know young adults and even older generations struggle with this, is the fear of being the fool, the fear of being someone who doesn't know something. And it makes us uncomfortable to get out in there, because, oh, what are people going to think of me if I am I not that great? Maybe you want to go and learn how to dance, but you don't know how to dance. You're like, well, I don't want to go to instructor and, be 45 and not know how to dance. That's really awkward. And it's really important to love and embrace this role, because this role is the learning process of becoming a master, of becoming great. And so anything you do in life, you're gonna have to be a fool. And so fully embrace it and love it and enjoy that part of being a fool, because that is the stepping stone for becoming great at something.
Totally. Yeah, you got to enjoy the journey along the way. And will you fail? What's the worst case? You fail, people laugh at you. But then, especially in a modern society, the news cycle is so fast that by tomorrow they're forgotten. You know what I mean? Unless it's, if it's there is a certain degree of sort of Schadenfreude, like, a German word where like people like to laugh at the misfortune of others. If it's sort of like a comeuppance, like someone that is universally disliked, has something bad happen to them, it's human nature to kind of have a laugh at that. But if your intentions are good and you're genuinely trying at something and you fail and you're learning, I think for the most part, people not only are accepting of it, and even if there's laughter, I think people will generally be encouraging of it and kind of go, well, look, they had the guts to do it. They at least were out there, learning to dance, and often they'll look at, they go, gee, I wish I had that confidence, or that, look at them, they're not there yet, but they're trying. And anyone that sort of, you have your people that will get out there and do things and fail, and then there's others that will sit by the sidelines and kind of like go, gee, I wish I was doing that, but I don't have the courage or the confidence. So the first step is being okay with failure, laughing it off, and then getting up and doing it again. And once you're okay with that, there's not much you can't do if you keep going and going and going.
100%. And I think it's important to know is that people who laugh at those who are really trying and putting the effort in to grow and play the fool, the people that laugh are the people who are afraid of the fool. They are afraid of doing that themselves. And so these are the people that can ridicule and often do these things, because deep down they're afraid of taking that leap. They lack that confidence. They're the same people saying, gee, I wish I could do that. And one thing that you said, kind of going back a little bit, that I'd love to touch on, when you're talking about the game development and you're talking about the Stardew guy, and you said, oh, he could have listened to that voice inside of him that said, oh, bite off a smaller project, he wouldn't be in it where he is. And I love to kind of talk about that, because I think we all have this internal voice, and I think it comes, and we have these two polarities of voices, right, of our consciousness inside of us that kind of leads us to do things, right? For example, I have this internal pull to do a podcast, and so I had this pull to say, like, I wanted to be here to be with you right now, to share what I know with the world, to ask you and have you share what you know. But right before this, and right before I called you, I had another, internal voice that goes, this isn't that. You don't need to really do this. You're kind of tired right now. Just maybe you can call it off and do it tomorrow, and you can kind of just like maybe watch a show that you've been wanting to watch, right? And I think we all kind of have this. And so I was wondering what your thoughts on this are, and moving forward, like navigating this.
Yeah, and like, that can be so seductive in terms of like the instant gratification of, when you, for example, you don't feel like going out on a cold night to a party, and the instant gratification of texting, sorry guys, can't make it, and sitting down and watching a movie on the couch. There's that sort of like, oh, I feel so good. But then a little while later you go, well, you know what? you know, maybe I should have gone out. I'm a little bit feeling a bit lonely now, or like, or you hear the next day, we had the best night. You missed out, and so
Mhm.
it's very. Anytime you kind of fall for the like instant gratification, sometimes and sometimes you just have to give into it and just let your give into what your body tells you. Like, I just need a night off, or I don't want to do this or whatever. But if you make a habit of that, then you never achieve anything. You never get anything done. So sometimes you just have to fight past that and just go, like, I'm gonna do this podcast because I will feel better about it. And it's also, this is something I've wanted to do, and I knew that it wasn't going to be, um, you know, completely easy because it's out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And say with me, I could make swords and sandals games forever, and there would be diminishing returns, so I probably couldn't. At some point, like if I keep doing the same thing forever, no one wants to hear Vanilla Ice singing "Ice Ice Baby" in 2023. So maybe in like 20 years' time, if people are saying you're still making swords and sandals, so like for me, in that same way that like, you don't necessarily feel like you're up for it if you don't step out of that comfort zone and try something new, then you're almost destined to fail. So I
Yeah.
think for me, like we were talking about before, is like the comparing yourself with others, and I have a constant fear of losing this, what I have built, the
Yep.
happiness that I've built, because I'm even though we kind of go, well, you could always have more. You could always have a fancier house, or a faster car, or whatever it is. I feel like as I've gotten to this age, I'm now kind of, I feel like I'm here. I'm very content. I've got everything I could really want, um, in a realistic sense. And now I'm having to fight to keep that. And so that's where the fear and often the motivation for me to keep going and to keep, I never stop making games, in terms of I'll finish a game, might have a few days off, if that, then I'll start the next one, because I feel that if I don't keep swimming, I'll drown,
Yeah.
you know?
Because I think with this, in the world that we live in, right, if you become stagnant and you don't move, you sink. And I think that's, life is like a river that's always flowing. And if you flow against the current, you're going to get tired, and you're going to be in a, you're going to sink, you're going to drown. If you kind of just sit there, the river's going to take you wherever the river pleases, and that's normally not a great place. And so I think that the trick of life is being able to find a way to flow with the current, to flow with the river. And I think when you do this and find your grace in flowing with this, I think that kind of that fear you talk about, and these anxieties and worries, they don't melt away, but you kind of find this groove that you get to work through. Because as you say, it's so important to always keep moving, to always take that step, because even if it's just the tiniest step, because I think I don't fear much in life. I used to fear a lot. Really, the only thing that I fear now is regret. And I fear living my life and then looking back and going, wow, I could have done so much more with my life. Like, I could have been a better person. I could have learned more. I could have given back to more people. Because I think really, ultimately, life is about growing yourself, learning, and helping the people around you. And really, everything else doesn't necessarily matter. Everything else is kind of forgotten at the end of the day.
Absolutely. That's you, for a young man, you have a very wise head on your shoulders. I'll just tell you that now. There is when you're talking about the sort of analogy of rivers, and going with the current and so on. There's an old saying, and I don't know, it's a Chinese philosopher or something, someone, a Roman or someone, but it says something like, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it says, look for the swirling waters, because there, put your hand in, that's where the fish are.
Ha ha ha
You know what I
ha.
mean? So if the water is calm and there's no fish. But if you really want something, go for that turbulence. Not to say, jump into a raging current, but sometimes you have to put yourself out there and not live with regret. Um, one of the things that I have struggled with over the years in terms of happiness and contentment and so on is um, being nostalgic about the past and
Mm-hmm.
where I was in the past and kind of thinking, well, I regret not doing this or not doing that longer and so on. But you know, I've seen in my wife the other night and it's fun to kind of have like, wouldn't it have been cool if I'd done this, or sort of be a little you know role play what you could have done, if I'd lived in this other city longer, or made this decision or that decision. But as we touched on earlier, every decision you've made has taken you to where you are today. And nostalgia is something that, and I've made a currency of nostalgia in terms of like the reason I can still sit here today, and my job is to make my games based on the nostalgic love of these games from my audience. So it has been good, but nostalgia is also. Here's a funny thing, Ryan. Um, Nostalgia is a combination of two Greek words, right? And it's nostos and algos. And nostos means homecoming, and algos means pain. So it's almost like a return to a wistful return to a painful place. And it sounds weird to think of nostalgia being painful, but you nostalgia can be a wonderful thing, but too much of it means you're sort of trying to wallow in the past and trying to get
Yeah.
to back to a place where you can never go.
Yeah.
And if you try to live in the past, then you miss out on the present.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so very, very tricky is we all, as we grow up, as a kid, I just wanted to be an adult, and as an adult, I just want to be a kid. And it's so tricky as you get older. We have these nostalgias for the ways that we felt and the smells of our childhood home, smelling the fresh snow and pine cones and all of these things, take us back to a time where we didn't have all of these issues and problems and debts and mortgages and this freedom that we kind of want, right? Because I think freedom is the most like important thing, because without freedom we feel trapped and we feel
Hmm.
constrained, and having that nostalgia that we kind of wallow in is as you said, it could be very tricky. It could be a very not dangerous thing, but I think it's so important to be now. That's why I think all of the main teachings of any real like spirituality is always talking about just being here and now, because if you're in the past, you're going to have what is called as depression, and if you're living in the future always worrying about that, you're going to have what is called anxiety. And there's no cure for either of the two except becoming here and now, coming back. And that's really the only cure for those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in the present is, like you say, it's the only way you can deal with those two things, because you know, the future can be exciting, the past can be wonderful to remember, but you spend too long in one of those two places and you get lost.
Yeah.
There's a reason that like the Japanese love the cherry blossoms. The cherry blossom season that they have, this is very fleeting. It's only a few weeks a year in March. It is because it one of the reasons it's beautiful. You have these beautiful blossoms all through the city and the country. But one of the reasons is it makes them appreciate being in the present, because
Yeah.
these things don't last for long, and it brings them back to the present. And at some point you get older and you kind of go, wow, those were the good old days. The days we're in now, and they're the good old days. So you try and have to like just appreciate where you are now, and the friends you have now, and especially while you're relatively young, the body you have,
Yeah.
the miracle of the human body, and the fact that we can do all these things, and the unlimited potential you have to learn piano, or go anywhere in the world, within reason, but like the infinite possibility we have.
Yeah, there's so much that we can do in our life and experience now, that it's so important to be here and to be now. And that's why, in a weird way, depression and anxiety are very helpful. They're very, very important, because they're reminders that, hey, come back to now, come back to being here, because right now is the good old days, and you can make them the good old days. And so taking time to be mindful and to be present of, going on a walk, or taking time to look at flowers, smell the roses as you go by, is so, so important, because we live our lives always not here. When it's so crazy how much we don't listen. We'll go through our days. If you really pay attention as you go through your day, you'll realize you're not really here. For example, you might be, walking to the kitchen, and instead of just walking to the kitchen, you're going, oh, I'm going to eat this out of the fridge, and I'm going to drink this, and then afterwards I'm going to go watch a TV show, and then all of a sudden the day's over. And you spent the whole day either thinking about the past or worrying about the future or planning for it, and you were never really in the present moment doing what you are doing. And it's really a tragic thing that most people kind of live their lives never really engaging in the now.
Absolutely. The beginning of the podcast, when you did the breathing exercises and the mindfulness, my wife is a big practitioner of mindfulness, and it's something that I have wanted to get into, and I haven't tried very hard. I got to the second stage where it was like, low knowledge, low skill kind of thing, and then, low enthusiasm. But I can see how important that is, because even at the beginning when I was doing that, I don't know, you might be able to see it on the video, but my eyes are sort of like, you got that REM state where like a million things are still going through my head, and it's very hard for everybody. Maybe it is for everybody. I find it really hard to just let that go and be in the moment, and just literally try smelling a flower. That smell amazing. But it's those actions that, calm your mind, and not thinking about what I want to get for food, all these different things. Just be aware of these steps, of your breathing and so on. And I, without being any good at it, I would recommend trying mindfulness to anyone.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's one of the best things you can do for your mental health, and it's something that I want to get better at.
It truly changed my life. So with me, when I was around 18 or 19, struggled immensely with anxieties and depression, and I was just in a really bad state in my life. And I was going to therapy, and I was told that I had chronic depression, and I was going to be this because of a chemical imbalance in my brain, and I was going to be depressed for the rest of my life, and that I needed to take medication. And that's what he told me. And I rejected that notion and said I didn't want to do that. And I really dove into the world of mindfulness. So I dove into meditation and more to calm my mind, because it was always racing. And I experienced the same things that you talked about, because mindfulness at the beginning, it's kind of like going to the gym, but for your mind. When you first go to the gym, your muscles are weak and everything's really difficult. Push-ups are really hard, and you can't really do anything. And the next day you're just sore and everything's just awful. But if you go for, a couple of weeks, you'll realize you'll start getting stronger. And it's the same for mindfulness, where the way you calm a mind is you can't think to yourself, I'm going to calm my mind, because you're using the mind to calm the mind, and it's just going to go around in circles. It's like a dog chasing its own tail. The mind is like a lake inside of our body. And of course, the way you calm water is just by leaving it be. And so the practice of mindfulness and meditation isn't to do anything. It's to listen. It's to sit and just watch your mind, and to watch your body, and to just be aware of it. And it'll be kind of like a child, where you'll be sitting there meditating, and like all of a sudden you're thinking about something. Oh, what am I going to do? And you go, no. We're coming back to watching the breath or looking at a candle. And then it goes away. No. You bring it back calmly, without judgment, like a monkey or a little child running around, and you keep bringing it back. And eventually it kind of just gets bored and gives up. And most of our lives, our mind like runs us. Our mind is always doing things. And we can actually gain control of our mind, of our thoughts. We can learn to calm and silence it through the act of just, I don't want to use like the words meditation and mindfulness because I feel like, there's so much new age that's used, but it's just an act of listening, of taking time to sit down and just listen to your body, to your emotions, and to your mind.
So true. And for those who kind of think, well, my mind is racing all the time, those are the ones that you need it the most. Some people say I could never do that because my mind is always active, and I have my own doubts in terms of, well, I cannot shut off my mind. But I've had little breakthroughs with it where I've gone, yeah, it is possible. And the positive change is remarkable. And it's just like the positive change you find going to a gym or going running or wherever it is. You like you spoke on an earlier podcast that if you were given one car for your whole life, you'd look after it, right? Same with your body, same with your mind. You have to treat them in terms of you got them for your whole life. So do whatever you can to sort of, treat it right, and also be forgiving of it as well, because these things don't happen instantly.
Exactly. It's like those small steps every day that we take to be mindful, to bring ourselves back to the present moment whenever we kind of get lost and get frustrated. And to those of you that have a crazy mind, for those of you that it's racing and running all of the time, and I've talked to people and I've experienced this myself, when you first start mindfulness, it almost feels like you become more anxious. You become more kind of stressed in a sense. And it's not necessarily that it makes you more of this. You are just simply becoming aware of what's always there. When you have a busy mind, it's kind of like static TV that's always running in the background, like a white noise, just a psh, but we become accustomed to tuning it out through social media, music, video games, TV shows, and things that we do to distract ourselves from our noisy mind. And the act of meditation kind of brings these things to the surface, and we acknowledge them and see them, and actually they start to go away. And so in the beginning, meditation's actually it can be very challenging and very difficult because it's bringing to the surface problems and mental activity we're not aware of all the time. But by being aware of it and noticing it and realizing it and seeing that, it then begins to kind of become more calm, and you're able to have that static turn off. And when you have a moment in your life where that static finally turns off and you get to experience what people call meditation, the place between thoughts, flow state, mindfulness.
Flow state, yeah, I was gonna say.
It's your mind, it clicks of what it's all about. And I think that's so important to live our lives to be working towards those.
And it's obviously, worked for you, and you've basically been able to sort of counter, a medical diagnosis of like, you're going to need these pills and so on, and you're never going to get past this. To like, what, I don't accept that. I believe that, I can turn this around, and you've been able to. So, you're a testament to sort of the power of the mind, and the power of also just not giving up on something, because I'm sure it wasn't easy in the beginning. And you turn it around.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Oliver, thank you so much for joining us today on this podcast. It's been an honor to be able to talk to you and hear your thoughts on life. It's been really wonderful, my friend.
It's been a great pleasure, Ryan, and I wish you all the success. And humans are weird. And I look forward to hearing from more weird humans in the episodes to come.
So, Oliver, before you go, a quick closing comment. If you were to sit yourself down with a younger version of you, maybe a 15, 16, or 20-year-old version of you, what would you say to them to give them advice into the world? Or what would you tell them to help them find what they're looking for?
I mean, the flippant answer would be like, buy Bitcoin and then sell. No, but I mean, honestly, I feel like because I'm in the state now where I am, and everything's happy, I would just say have confidence that you're making the right decisions. And even if you're not, uh, you're gonna be okay. There's a cheesy old song by a guy called Rod Stewart, who's in his 70s, 80s now. But there's a line from the song that says, "Lucky is believing you're lucky."
Oh, I
Luck
love
is just
that.
believing you're lucky. So if you just kind of go, you know what, I can succeed. No one's telling me otherwise, and you don't always get there, but at least you'll enjoy the journey. And
Yeah.
that's what I think what I tell myself is don't worry too much about the small failures along the way, because all you got to do is be a bit lucky and survive, and then in 30 years time, you're going to be pretty happy. Even if I can't tell you how, you'll get there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Oliver. And of course, my friends, stay weird.